feeling Puerto Rican up in here. Anyway, hi everyone. I'm with my lovely producer Marina, or Marina.
I think we've done this maybe once before on a previous season, maybe season 4, where we're doing kind of like a lessons learned. I think this season in particular is really great to do a lessons learned because it is, I wouldn't say the heaviest season so far, but definitely where we kind of embraced more of some of your additional passions through your activism, especially when we were talking about socio-political issues. Like we had a few public service officials who were on the show, and also we just went a little bit more into the political side of things, which I think is important to talk about because we can't talk about parenting without also talking about policy. So this is kind of like your reactions, like things that you asked others, but you couldn't really answer because we're pressed for time always, and you're interviewing, you're not being interviewed. So we're flipping the mic again, and she's getting interviewed. So we're going to kick it off, and we're going to start by saying, or by asking you, what do you think felt different or especially urgent about season 6 compared to past season?
Speaking as a parent, but also as a citizen, as a human, as a person who cares about truth and values and empathy. The season that we just recorded was, I think, filled with all of these topics in one way or another. You know, we talked about actual, real, tangible policy, and we also talked about values that you want to instill in our children and future generations, and we talked about the importance of just raising a generation of truly kind, inclusive, and empathetic, you know, people who understand the importance of using our voice and our platform and our privileges for all of the right reasons, which to, you know, me and us, and I think most of my guests, it means, you know, uplifting voices that aren't necessarily being heard. And it means embodying truly what you want your kids to learn. Because it is through our example that we hope, you know, that they learn to be the kind of humans that this world needs. And so, yeah, I think it was probably one of the most important seasons, especially in this political climate, especially when things are so polarizing and dividing. I know people could probably, and probably do, think that...
We're going to have to pause because Francisco's calling her.
Oh.
So we're going to have to take this call. So hold,
Sorry.
please.
1 second.
Okay, so we're back. I think that was a really good answer to that just initial question to kick us off. Also, the first episode that we kicked the season off was particularly powerful. The episode was with Payal, Desai. And we discussed the dismantling of gender norms in parenting, the pressures of raising good men, and also how her background as an educator informs how she parents, especially since stepping back from the classroom. She now is a full-time content creator, but also a full-time mom. So she shared a very unique lens there. And I think that I would be remiss to not ask you this. Like, so do you feel like there was something in particular that was discussed that you have since kept top of mind as you're now a boy mom as well as a girl mom?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many bits and pieces of the episode that I just want to keep listening to over and over and keep reminding myself of. So much wisdom there. One of my favorite episodes for real, because Payal is just so great. And it's unfortunately still kind of taboo to talk about boys and men being allowed to be whatever they want to be, whether that be vulnerable, you know, emotional. We talked about boys painting their nails. And like, there should be things that are controversial in this life, like pedophilia and other things when it comes to children and what toys they play with and the nails, if they choose to paint their nails or not, should not be one of those super controversial things, right?
Yeah, it's wild.
And so
it does not make it make sense. Make it make sense.
For real. And I think that quote that Payal said about allowing boys, like giving them permission to be who they are, that has stuck with me. And even though I still have a baby boy, you know, I still haven't fully seen what he will like and not like and his preferences when it comes to, you know, dress up and toys. But he has 2 older sisters, and I'm, you know, I'm already expecting him to play like a normal child with older siblings, like they want to maybe imitate their siblings. And again, there's age appropriate things, and then there's not age appropriate things. But I don't think it's a matter of what's gender appropriate or not. You know, kids are kids, toys are toys. Playing dress up, playing with anything that's age appropriate is fine, no matter if you're a boy or a girl.
Yeah, 100%. One thing that was really beautiful that kind of encompasses what you're saying right now, it happened only a few days ago. You guys had friends over. Those friends also have 3 children, and one of them is a boy, and then he has 2 sisters. And when I walked in, he was wearing a dress, you know, like he's around. Yeah, they were playing dress up. That is okay. Yeah, that is completely fine.
He was one boy amongst 4 girls, 4 little girls.
Yeah.
It's all very innocent. It's contrary to what I guess a small population of the people, hopefully small, believe. Those kinds of things don't influence a person's preferences, like sexual preferences, you know, or the way they see themselves. And it's, I think one thing that I know, like we've come, I think, a pretty long way in empowering girls to kind of be who they are and whatever they want, right? And I think that's a really good thing. And I think we've sort of taken that power away from boys, and that's why there's this like male loneliness epidemic, because we've just suppressed so much of little boys' potential with all of these like gender norms and expectations and limitations, right? If you limit anyone or box them in or reduce them to anything, it's going to take away some of their humanity, right? Inherently. And it's sad that people refuse to see that because they're so stuck in this really, I guess, constricted, narrow framework for what boys and men are.
Yeah. I don't know if everybody sees it this way, but I certainly do. It's like we've really taught women and girls, we've taught girls to be brave, right? To really be brave. And I think boys need to be brave too. Like brave enough to be themselves. And you mentioned the male loneliness epidemic. You know, it's talked about a lot right now. And I think a lot of it is men kind of have lost that bravery and like have lost that confidence in themselves to be able to, because a lot of it is in the context of like a lot of men are almost like petrified to approach women as well because they just don't feel confident enough to do that. And I think a lot of that is just how you've been socialized. I think if you have good values, why not feel the confidence enough to approach anybody, man, women? You should feel like your personality is worth sharing with the world. But that comes from like being somebody that has a good head on their shoulders, has good values, you know, a good moral compass, you know, share that with others.
I mean, and part of being confident is kind of keeping your mates in check. Like if you see, you know, men kind of acting poorly, you're confident enough in who you are and what you stand for to be able to speak up and advocate and be like, hey, you know, that wasn't cool, or what you're doing is messed up, and keep each other accountable. You know, I feel like that's what we're lacking 100%. Because like that's why feminism and things that we talk about as women sometimes sounds like old and tiring for guys because they're not hearing it from other men. They're just hearing it from us.
Yeah.
And it's like hearing things from your mom over and over and over where it sounds like nagging, but then a friend tells you something and you're like, oh, maybe there's a point there. Maybe they're right about something, and it's not that it should be this way. Like, still listen to us. We have good things to say. We have good points, and we're very capable and want to have loving, honest, open conversations that bring about growth at the end of the day.
Yeah, we can't do it alone.
But yeah, we can't do it alone.
Yeah.
We need other men to speak up and advocate for each other and for women as well.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about not being able to do things alone, I think there was also the episode with Carolina, Rubio, MacWright. That episode was equally powerful, however, completely different topics that were discussed, but I think it requires the same level of urgency and also conversation. Carolina, just as a refresher, she shared how she uses art and legal workshops to empower immigrant communities, especially mothers and children. She also reflected on the trauma of migration, motherhood as resistance, and how storytelling can reshape policy and restore dignity. One thing that really stuck with me from that episode was how she's modeled that so hard that her children even call her out when she's not doing it. Like her daughter being like, we haven't visited the local food pantry in a while. Like, why haven't we done that? So that's, I know, something that you talk about a lot in episodes throughout the seasons that you don't know yet. I mean, you see it with Catalina because she's the eldest, but the things that you're modeling, you just hope that you continue to do that so that they really, you can see the fruits of your labor like later on. So I guess I ask you, like, in what ways do you feel like you would want Catalina Mapolenko to model your activism? I'm assuming it's something as empathy as a core value for sure, but like anything that you
yeah. I mean, I just want them to be kind and empathetic, and I will use that word ad nauseum, like radical empathy and radical love.
You actually wrote something really beautiful. You might want to read it. You wrote something that it's like perfect here if you want to.
I will take a stab at it. Okay, yeah, I remember writing this.
Everybody says you have a very soothing voice, so this is your moment to narrate.
I hope that's true. Okay, so when I say I want to raise empathetic children, I don't mean the kind of empathy that's conditional or selective. The kind that only shows compassion when harm comes to people who look like them, believe like them, or live in their communities. I mean the kind of deep human empathy that recognizes the dignity and worth of everyone, including brown people, immigrants, refugees, and others who are too often dehumanized or scapegoated. True empathy doesn't wait for injustice to land close to home. It responds to suffering wherever it appears, even when it challenges our comfort or our worldview. This includes rejecting the kind of performative morality we see in some, where faith is used not as a call to love and justice, but as a shield for racism, homophobia, and xenophobia. I want my children to understand that no belief system makes anyone inherently superior, especially when it's used to exclude, condemn, or dominate others. If our empathy only extends to people who look, worship, or think like us, then it's not empathy at all. It's tribalism dressed up as virtue. We need a collective conscience that is inclusive, not selective, rooted in our shared humanity, not in fear or false moral hierarchies.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I hope that all of our children feel like they have safe spaces where they can, be authentic and speak up for what they believe in and share, their hearts and their values with people in the world. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel safe right now for a lot of people to be who they are authentically. It doesn't feel safe to speak up and advocate for, a lot of marginalized communities right now. And that's really sad. And it's something that I hope that by the time my children are of, age to talk about and think about and like critically think about these issues, that it feels safe to do so. And also, even if it doesn't feel safe, I hope that I've encouraged them through my example that, while yes, our safety is important, it shouldn't be at the cost of other people's dignities, right? There's always a balance that it's important to strike. And as a mom who feels responsible for the safety of my family, my children, obviously I think about it a lot. But there are times that call for this kind of bravery where it might not feel safe, but this isn't about us. This is about our communities. This is about other people who are being, discriminated against and vilified. And this is about coming together so that we feel less alone and like we have more power than we're told that we have, right? So yeah, it's a complex time, but
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Paquito me está llamando otra vez.
Oh, do you have to answer?
No sé.
And we're back again. I feel like I want to insert here like guess who's back? Back again.
It sounds very familiar, pero como que no.
I will insert it right here.
Okay.
Guess who's back? Back again. Shady's back.
Moving on, I think that we're not going to talk about this too much, but obviously you can see that we're repping some heavy PR
Wait.
pride.
Can we see it?
Yeah,
Is it
well,
visible?
we're going to get zoomed in for sure right there. Zoom in post.
Feeling
Zoom in post.
Puerto Rican.
And we're very Puerto Rican. El querido Concho. The reason we're repping is because this might obviously not be released the same week. It will actually not, but this week the Super Bowl happened, the halftime show happened, Benito Bowl happened, and
For the record, at least I rep Puerto Rico often, but this whole week it was more of a like move. I'm Puerto Rican vibe. You know?
I mean, I rep Puerto Rico often. I wear Puerto Rico on my neck every day. But the reason I'm mentioning it now is because we had that episode with Julissa Arce, which I feel like she's not even Puerto Rican, but like sometimes she's like more Puerto Rican than we're
Puerto
like
Rican.
Puerto Rican. Like she's like so academic almost about
Bad Bunny.
About Bad Bunny.
Yeah. In the historical context and like cultural, and I just love it. I can't wait for her new book.
I know. It's going to be so good.
Yeah.
But the episode with her, you guys unpacked the costs of assimilation, the myth of the American dream, and how her undocumented past shaped her political and personal identity. She discussed motherhood, media representation, and her call to center cultural pride in Latinx communities. It was a super powerful episode. I encourage everybody to go check it out. We're going to get into more of the heavy right now as well. You had the opportunity to interview a reporter this time around with Benjamín Zamora. He spoke about reporting on ICE raids, shootings, economic injustice, while trying to shield his children from secondhand trauma. You guys reflected on how to raise informed kids without robbing them of innocence. How you feel like you have already had to practice that at all?
in ways, especially, when you have such inquisitive children, you don't want to lie to them. You want to give them honest answers that are age appropriate, right? And I think we continue to kind of exercise that muscle as they grow, because obviously what's age appropriate changes the older they get. And so, yeah, I've definitely had to have conversations and not so much yet about these specific topics like shootings and stuff like that. Like that hasn't come up yet. And I am shielding my children from social media for as long as possible.
Yeah.
But inevitably, they're going to be around other kids who do have social media or, who have heard or seen things that maybe they will have yet, to see or hear about. And I predict having a lot of these conversations the older they get. But even now, when at the age my oldest is, it was just 5, she'll have really interesting questions, and I have to, figure out how to frame my answer that's appropriate for her age. So,
Yeah. I think it'll evolve over time.
Yeah.
But it's cool that you have the privilege to have these conversations, and you are also making it an opportunity for other people, so that like when you get there, maybe you're just better prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's the most you can do at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And also I always think about this. You might not think similar to me, but we'll see. The episode that we had with Vanessa Diosdado was also very special. She, similarly to Benjamín, is kind of like reporting, but she's not a reporter.
Mm-hmm.
She uses social media as her platform to, share news. And a lot of it had to do recently with also ICE raids and, representation of immigrants or immigrant issues, or a lot of that currently. She also is a interesting face in that space because she's so young. And so we inevitably talked about her experience as a teen mom and a digital activist. And when we were setting up this episode, I remember it triggered a question in me that I wanted to ask you. And this is what I'm like, I don't know if you think similarly to me. But you obviously weren't a teen mom by any means, but you also had your children very young, your first, quite young. Like, it's odd to meet a 31-year-old that already has 3 children. Like, it gets more and more odd.
Yeah.
Do you have any reflections you like to share about that experience of like you getting pregnant, not as a teen, but also young, and like not having people around you that you were like...
I was definitely the first of my close-knit circle of friends. The first by pretty, like, my friends are now having their first as I had my third, right? And so, yes, it felt lonely and isolating in ways, and I've talked about that a lot also, which contributed to my postpartum depression. I didn't really have a village, a community of new moms that were going through it with me for the first time, who had just been through it recently. Most of my friends, like you, were still in school. They were finishing, law school or whatever studies they ended up, pursuing. And those had been my aspirations as well, right? I had planned on going to law school and, in my mind, doing some impactful work, right? That was always my goal. I was never like how I was going to achieve it. There was always questions about that in my mind, but I always knew I wanted to do something that was going to positively impact people's lives, right? And the way I had envisioned doing that was via law. I thought it would make my career path more credible in a way, or like more impactful, or, who knows? I was in my early 20s. I didn't really know much about anything. And my parents are attorneys, there's that. It was like something familiar. Like, both my parents are lawyers, and it's something I knew to be possible because I saw my parents impacting people's lives every day. But now that I'm a mom and I'm a little older, more mature, I realize that the ways that impacted me about how they impacted people's lives was not directly through law. It was through who they were inherently as humans and how they help people pro bono. That's what I think about the most. Like, the work my parents did, and I will speak specifically for my mom right now, like for the homeschooling community in Puerto Rico, for example. She was the legal advisor and she did a lot of pro bono work. And when I say pro bono, I mean like pro bono forevermore. Like, it wasn't like people paid her later. Like, no, she didn't charge this community of people because she believed in the work she was doing. She believed that there was like to help people, right? It was not with any interest. I remember my dad saying like, hey, like, it's a 1-income household. Like, it'd be great if you could like charge for your work because we are struggling here. And I remember her saying, there's no way I can charge these people. And then my dad, like, I learned about the barter system really early because with my dad, they're small town lawyers, right? As small town attorneys, they, took cases that walked in the door from people who couldn't necessarily pay, what it would cost for them to do the work they did, and they would still do the work they did despite these clients not being able to pay for it, and they would accept payment in other forms, like, oh, what are your talents? You are a carpenter. Okay, you can make stuff for me, and then like they would offer, like, I'll bake you a cake. And they ended up accepting that kind of form of payment, which obviously in turn made us struggle a little more financially, but it wasn't for that reason, and of course, we need money to live, to pay for, it's not always a realistic thing to expect, right? But I learned at the heart and at the core of what it means to be someone who cares for other people in your community. It's really, it's that work of again, of community, of being someone who says, it's fine, you can't pay me, I'm still going to help you. I'm still going to impact your life positively. And I've learned that there's many ways to do that. It doesn't have to be necessarily through a specific career or a specific method. And so this was a bit of a tangent, but going back to your question, I struggled a lot when I first got pregnant with my self-image and with not having achieved, quote unquote, a professional career that I thought I could look back on and say, I'm proud of this, that I did this. And also I realized, while yes, having kids puts a lot of things on pause, it doesn't mean that it's forevermore, right? There's phases. There's going to be a time in my life when maybe I want to go back to school and do something, and priorities shift. And so maybe what you end up wanting to do is not what you thought you wanted in your early 20s.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to have kids and then they figure out what they wanted to do, meaning like having children either reinforce something in them or made them see something, a gap, a need, in a different way. And I mean, that's a blessing, because how would you know if you hadn't had them, right?
Correct.
So,
yeah. I mean, and obviously it does not elude me that I'm just so, privileged to be able to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, I don't have to figure this out right now because I don't have to bring in an income for our family to live well, right? So I say that a lot. I reiterate it a lot because I don't pretend to sit here and be like, yeah, this is what I lived, and like everyone's life can be like that. Like, no, obviously I understand there's so many different realities. And I sit in a position of true, privilege to be able to even choose to not go to work or not go back to school or whatever it may be,
yeah. No, there's this thing, I'm looking at the phone. Sorry, guys. I'm looking at the phone because what you're going on right now is somewhat of what I found really interesting about the episode with Haley Williams Pepper. Obviously, you guys shared a lot of similarities from the get-go, but I think that it was a powerful episode because of it's two women from a position of privilege ensuring that they're not taking that for granted and letting people know that just because they have that position doesn't mean that they remain silent. If anything, they have to speak up for those who don't have what they do. So, again, you guys talked about being married to professional athletes, but also navigating, political advocacy. You also, this came at an interesting time. You had been selected for Mamdani's inauguration committee. And I'm going to pass the phone back to you because, again, you were talking about that the privilege, the position of privilege that you have doesn't elude you. And you wrote something really beautiful. And I think it's in combination with the Mamdani inauguration and that episode, this makes a lot of sense. And if it doesn't, we're going to unpack it, but we're gonna pass it.
I mean, I think the way my parents raised me is just so beautiful, looking back now, because I lived a really simple, not a luxurious life at all by any means. I think the privileges I grew up experiencing were mainly just the time and the love that was invested into me by my parents, and not everyone has that. And I realize that now, that was the biggest privilege, because it made me who I am, truly. And I didn't grow up with like the financial privileges and none of that, but that's not what would have made me who I am, It
And
was
that's
everything
why
else.
what you write here makes a lot of sense. Your stance on this makes a lot of sense.
So
So,
let me read more of what I wrote. A lot of people assume there is a contradiction between enjoying the benefits of a well-paid, hard-earned career and supporting democratic socialist policies, but there really isn't. Having a comfortable life doesn't mean you suddenly have to pretend you didn't earn it or feel guilty for it. Democratic socialism isn't about saying success is bad or that everyone should live the same way. It's about making sure that basic things like education, healthcare, and childcare aren't luxuries only some people can afford. You can recognize that you've done well and acknowledge that you didn't do it in a vacuum. Most people who succeed benefit, at least in part, from public systems. Schools, roads, universities, medical research, worker protections, and general social stability, all funded by taxpayers. Wanting those systems to be stronger and more accessible is less about tearing anything down and more about making sure others have a fair shot too. There's also a misconception that democratic socialism is just another word for communism, which really muddies the conversation. They're not the same thing at all. Democratic socialism works within a democratic system and a mixed economy. Private businesses still exist, people still earn different incomes, and markets still function. The difference is that society collectively decides to invest more in public goods and social safety nets. Communism, on the other hand, involves state ownership of most or all industries and the elimination of private enterprise, which is a completely different model. Supporting higher taxes for things like education or healthcare doesn't mean you're against wealth or success. It means you believe that doing well comes with some responsibility to help maintain the systems that make a stable, fair society possible. You can enjoy what you've earned while still believing that no one should go bankrupt from medical bills or be locked out of opportunity because they were born into the wrong circumstances. At the end of the day, it's not about hypocrisy as some people want to claim. It's about values. You can believe in individual achievement while also recognizing that effort and contribution aren't always rewarded fairly. Wanting a society that guarantees access to education, healthcare, and basic security isn't a rejection of success. Rather, it's a statement that dignity shouldn't be conditional on income. A healthy society makes room for both personal ambition and shared responsibility. So, when you want a society where people can pursue success in different ways and where everyone has access to basic security, that's not a contradiction, It's a value choice that we can and should recognize.
I like your "yeah now," because yes, y'all should know. That was awesome. Yeah, you write good.
Thanks. Sometimes I have moments to concentrate. When I don't, it's
They're rare, but they happen.
So many thoughts. How do I put them in words? And children running around and overstimulation.
I mean, honestly, it's I don't know how I'll fare. Hopefully well, but Katia and I do longer stints when we're together during the off season, and so I've been here for a long while now. And even at the end of the day, like I haven't been with the kids all day, but like I get overstimulated by the noise, like they are shrieking and they're having fun. They're just being children, right? But like gets to a point where you're like...
And as far as we know, you're neurotypical, right?
Yeah.
Whereas neurodivergent brains are just like...
As far as I know. I think I am. But also, I wouldn't mind a hint of that. And that's with 3 very healthy children.
Right.
I want to talk about the fact that there are a lot of people navigating additional challenges. And you are already a part of Scene, the nonprofit Scene, and you had Cristina Pocta, who is one of the founders of Scene.
Mm-hmm.
And you spoke of supporting systems that help everyone. She opened up about raising 2 children with spina bifida and also adopting her youngest son. Scene is a nonprofit to support caregivers because, boy, do they need it even without the additional challenges. But Scene supports those that are facing additional challenges. I guess, what do you think it means to be seen when so much of a parent's labor is invisible?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question.
It is, sorry. My bad.
No, I mean, as moms, I think we become accustomed to our work being invisible, right? And so much of the mental load is really intangible, and hard to describe, and living it is really the only way to experience it fully. But when you talk about Cristina and moms who have these additional challenges from, you know, other moms who also have challenges, talk about not all heroes wear capes, you know? Like, I think every mom is a superhero, you know, every mom who's like, you know, present and intentional. Don't get me wrong, because the work we do in general is hard, and it's so important. But Cristina is just on another level of superhero.
Cristina, if you're hearing or watching this,
yeah, props, man.
Oh my God.
I mean, and it's not just the challenges that she as a mom faces. It's the sweet and kind children she has been able to raise so far, in you know, in the midst of their additional challenges, and talk about a society that is not prepared to really see the ableism in it, you know? Like, there's so much that we can and need to do to improve just systems and structures that are more inclusive to people with physical disabilities and, you know, mental disabilities. But here, talking about physical disabilities, it's just, you know, part of feeling seen is having quality life, right? And you can't fully have quality of life if you don't have the systemic support of the world you live in, right? And that's lacking so majorly in so many areas.
That support, that representation as well, like, for sure. That's how you feel seen. I might insert it if I find it, but this is reminding me of something that I just saw, because again, both our feeds are flooded with post Bad Bunny stuff. But, you know, a lot of people were complaining about the fact that there weren't English subtitles in the show. And I saw this reel of this woman, and she's deaf. And she starts the video kind of explaining, so, you know, and she's doing sign language. She's doing ASL. And so she basically is saying, oh, so you felt bad that you felt excluded because there weren't English subtitles. Oh, this and that. Welcome to our world. You know, that's how we feel most of the time. And the thing is that even somebody who was deaf, they were trying to experience what Bad Bunny was doing, performing, from the overall, honestly, what she said was like vibes. You know, it was like, you can still experience something without fully understanding it. But also, hey, wake up call. Like, yeah, we feel that all the time. And also, I will say that there were individuals in the show, I believe, that were doing ASL, but in Spanish. So I'm just inserting that as part of the conversation, because that is a community that very often is not seen. And it's beautiful for somebody who couldn't even hear, right, the music, but still accepted the fact that that was happening, and that she could still appreciate it. I
didn't see that reel, but that's awesome.
I'll send it to you.
It's awesome that she used that moment to be like, hey guys, welcome to this actually pretty big portion of society's everyday life, where we are excluded from everyday things that, you know, most of us take for granted.
So this is actually a really good moment to kind of wrap up with two episodes that I kind of want to combine, which was the episode with Gisela Reyes and Colin McQuillan, both doctors. I say both doctors like that because Gisela, literally shortly after the episode, she
finished her PhD.
She finished her PhD.
Had her dissertation and successfully. So she's my doctor friend, Gisela.
Props and bragging rights to you because she's your friend. And with Dr. McQuillan, it was especially special because I wish I could also interview like a former professor of mine. That is like a cool discussion. But in tandem with what we were discussing, like a lot of this behavior of you feeling seen and like also making sure that people feel seen has a lot to do with your values, hence has a lot to do with ethics and just, you know, like being a good human. So, the thing that stuck with me most when Dr. McQuillan, it was when Dr. McQuillan said that he believes that ethics is the responsibility of everyone all the time. But what are your thoughts about your conversation with him? Like, what was something that stuck with you? If it was the same, I don't know, your thoughts on that.
That moment was definitely like one of those, like, on repeat, I could reshare this every day of my life.
Yeah.
But there were so many just nuggets of wisdom in there, as not just as a philosopher or as a parent, but, you know, as a human who has thought critically and in depth more than most people. Like, philosophers will get to the bottom of of any topic, right? And they will see it from every which way.
I think he was holding back in the episode as well.
Probably just, you know, gave it to us in more en arroyo habichuela, like we say. But the heart of what he was saying is just so important, right? And it goes back to the values that I learned, you know, about how truth and honesty were essential, you know, in my household. And when you frame it the way Dr. McQuillan framed it in that episode about caring about the truth, and how if you just model that to your children, right, in ways that they understand that, hey, when you care about the truth, you're going to automatically care about justice and, you know, all of the things that I've talked about and care about, it just came together beautifully for me, even in an aha moment of, oh, that makes so much sense, right? Because it's like, what maybe keeps me up at night as a mom is like, how am I instilling these values in my children? How am I going to ensure this and that and this and that? We don't have the same upbringing, blah, blah, blah. We're not living in the same times, you know, in the political climate and so many things. I lived in Puerto Rico. They live here. You know, there's just so many factors to like what keeps me up at night. And Dr. McQuillan put it pretty simply in a way that lands and makes sense. And it's, I think, you know, applicable to all of us at all times.
Yeah.
And I mean, having taken, you know, college classes with him makes me nostalgic, not for that time period in my life, no, but for just, I guess, being in a classroom and just absorbing, I don't know, knowledge and having these conversations and being a sponge and, you know, discovering new things that excite you. And that was when I discovered that I liked philosophy classes, you know, the ethics class with him. I was just like, oh my gosh, I like this.
Yeah.
And I did well in his class, I think mostly because I loved his class. And I did ethics bowl with him. And that was another really, really fun, challenging, you know, project, I guess. It was like not a class per se, but kind of. And so I don't know, this episode was really special to me. Both what it represented to me personally, but also just the knowledge that came with that and the wisdom.
Yeah, I will say that while editing it, it was also one of the most enjoyable episodes for me. I just think what he said made so much sense, and I just don't understand how people don't get it, but that is a conversation for another day. So I guess just to wrap things up, what is something you hope our listeners took away from this season? You can put it briefly or lengthy, however much you want to talk about that. But yeah.
My intention has always been to, help whoever, you know, finds support with any of my episodes, but also to create a community of people, you know, that get it, to put it simply and shortly. And by that, I also mean, like, I know if you're listening to me right now at all, it's because we share certain values, right? And certain thought processes, perhaps, and maybe a lot of different ones, but, you're open enough to listen to something that maybe you don't agree with, or maybe you do, or, it's new to you. And at the end of the day, fomenting and strengthening our communities is so important to nurture future generations. It nurtures us, which in turn nurtures our children, which in turn nurtures our neighbors and our friends and family. And that's really the purpose of the Unaparent, right? And so for whatever any of these episodes might have been worth to whomever, I just hope it made you feel less alone and less hopeless. I know we're living in really hard times, but I refuse to lose hope. And so if this is a little beacon of hope to you, I'm glad, because I find little beacons of hope in, a lot of you, and all of your messages of positivity and encouragement mean the world to me. I do occupy an interesting space where a lot of the people that followed me maybe initially or for a specific reason, and I don't represent maybe their political views, and that's okay. But if anything that our content on the Unaparent elicits for you, or I don't know if that's the word, if any of it resonated, then this is your community and you are mine. So thank you for listening. And I hope you keep sharing your words of encouragement and positivity, because we all need it.
Yes. There's not much that I can add to that. So I'll just say, as the producer on the show, leave us a review, share the love, be part of our community. We actually do read everything.
It's hard to get back to everyone.
Yeah, but we do. We read it and we appreciate it, and it helps the show a lot. And if you help us, we'll help you for sure. That's the whole goal with this. So thank you for all the love and support always.
And remember, the only thing more powerful than hate
is
love. We're so Puerto Rican. Funny, baby.
Insert. Okay, yeah. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Unaparent Podcast, produced by Studio Dama and hosted by me, Katia Lindor. If you like what you heard, subscribe or follow us on social media and tune in as we share deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting.